Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And we will have the approval of the minutes. We have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Ron, will you turn on your microphone?
Motion carried.
Thank you.
Now you gotta start over.
No, you don't have to start over.
Okay. We got a public input. It doesn't look like anybody's here, so we will move on from that. With visitors numbers, Stephanie?
Sure. I thought, oh, shoot, you know what? This might not work. Let me see if I can get it to pull up.
No, it won't.
I thought it would be good to show you all what the, ooh, that's really loud right now. I don't know why that is. To look at what the visitor traffic looks like. I don't know if you've had the chance to see that or not before. One thing that you as a board might want to consider for future, we have the ability to put into the computer certain date ranges for different events. So if you want to start tracking the difference from festival from year to year to year, we can actually put that into the system and then it will keep an archive for you. So you can actually look at your in and out traffic for different events that you're hosting throughout the year, whether it be festival or if you have another concert that you end up planning during the year and you want to start using that for reference material. I just wanted you to be aware that it's an option that's available too, because I don't know if you've had the chance to see that. But I was going to pull this up. Hold on. I don't have my glasses on, so bear with me. And so here, we did add one location of counters, and that would be the rear doors. The reason for that is in the, during the rest of the year, when we have basketball games and things like that, there's a lot of traffic that comes in through those back doors. And so the thought was it would be nice to see what is happening for basketball games and things like that, to know how much is coming through all of our doors. And if we just pull up our year-to-date, and we're going to look at this date compared to last year. Actually, I should have went to table view. That's probably better for you anyway. So here you can see period 1 was from January 1st, 2018 through September 30th. You had, here's your total individual doors. And then here's the total for the period 2 is right beside it. So this would be your first year, and this is your second year. So I did not put it into an Excel spreadsheet quick. Oh, it does have the total right there. So on period 2, you're at 332, 206 is what it looks like. And period 1 is 344, 410. So pretty close to last year's numbers. And as you can see, it shows that you're down 4%.
Good. Are we going into executive session?
We have one more, number 5 there.
Number 5.
Yep. You got to look at the printed. Yeah.
I'm on
It's my fault for causing the confusion. I apologize about having to cancel
Okay,
last
we have a
Friday's meeting.
discussion on the policy for the naming and sponsorship rights.
Okay, so in your packet, what you would have received and what was included on the agenda on the website as well is 2 different things. The first thing was just a draft policy. Scott had put this together prior to him leaving. I believe it was really modeled after what Park and Rec and what their board had adopted. Actually, Jean, you might have seen it there too before you left, right? So it might look familiar there. And it's really kind of modeled after that. The reason for this is the city council had passed this resolution in 2018, and this resolution kind of set the standards for sponsorship and naming rights throughout the city for any city facility. The policy requires that any department that has a board bring any proposed policy to this board for review before it's for a recommendation to council. Once you've approved it, it will go to council and they'll sign off on it and then we'll have it in place. The reason why this is important now is that prior to leaving, Scott was contacted by, and I can't release all of the information until we get a formal agreement in place, but by a local business to sponsor some remodeling work that was happening kind of in our back of our Corn Palace areas. It was in the officials room and the training room. Jerry can correct me when I say this wrong if I get there. So part of that is they would like to have some kind of sponsorship that comes along with that. Prior to us being able to approve that agreement, we got to go through the steps of approving a policy. So by giving this to you ahead of time, what the hope is that you would have had a chance to kind of walk through that and provide feedback now of any changes that you would like to have made to this policy, or if you have any recommendations, and then we can bring it back for formal action at the next meeting. So did anyone have any comments after they reviewed it? I can tell you one comment that we received from the city attorney, which is probably a good one to consider, would be the new facility naming opportunities. I don't know if you're ever really going to change the name of the Corn Palace. It's probably going to be always the Corn Palace, but you might want to look at opportunities to name specific features within the Corn Palace, or if you wanted to do sponsorships of murals for a year, something like that. The other thing to keep in mind is, as you can see that's listed under right here, there is a current advertising agreement that's in place with Daktronics. Initially, it was supposed to expire in 2020 to 2021. I did have a conversation with them, and basically the agreement that's in place with Daktronics is they sell the advertising rights on the billboard, or on the, what do we call it, the scoreboard, until they generate enough to cover the cost of that scoreboard. We are pretty upside down in forecasting what that payoff would be. So that is not going to be accomplished by 2020 to 2021. It would be actually probably quite a few years after that. But there is always the opportunity that the city or the Corn Palace could make a recommendation to the city council in the future that we buy out of that contract, which would then open up more sponsorship and naming rights and advertising opportunities within the building moving forward. So it's just another thing I want to throw out there. So I really first want to just hear, what your input is on recommendations to the policy as it's stated.
Is it just a scoreboard, or is it like in front of the?
It's actually advertising throughout the facility. So anything that's happening in the facility has to have approval from Daktronics. So even with this remodeling project that's happening at the back end of the Corn Palace, or in kind of behind doors in the Corn Palace, that still is going to require approval from Daktronics because of that existing agreement that's in place. So right now, even if you had someone who wanted to come in and, give you $200,000 to put towards a concert or something like that, you really should have, if it's giving them some kind of advertising or naming rights within the building, Daktronics has to have the right to sign off on that first. Mm-hmm. Yep, so that's why I said you may want to consider in the future recommending the buyout of that contract so you could have a little more control on what you're doing in the building too.
Is that something that you could start the process?
I have already asked them for a quote of what that would be at different periods so that you could consider that in a future discussion. So.
And when did that start?
About 10 years ago. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
contract was 10 years.
Before I got here, so at least 5 years ago. So that was one comment Justin had, is you probably don't want to do facility naming rights because you probably, we've trademarked that world's only Corn Palace and everything else tied to that. So.
And did you say we did not have an official amount of what we owe Daktronics?
I know what is left on the contract. It says $73,000, but that's with annual payments that they get in advertising every year with the original contract going through 2021. So the way they were explaining it, I'm not sure I'm 100% following it. That's why I asked them for an actual calculation of the buyout, is that even though we only owe 73, that might not be what you would have to pay to get out of it. Might be more. So we'll see when that comes back, and part of that will be adjusted based on what they do for advertising for this year as well. So I don't know how the sales have been. I know we did just get a new one that we had to sign off on for Daktronics, so.
And they work directly with the sponsors.
They do.
Okay, so we really don't know what they, because they could be charging less, they could be charging more from when they first started, so.
Yep.
On the new facility, I mean, I don't think it's likely, but there is a possibility we might build a shed or something, or some kind of addition that we would want to retain that. Did Justin say we needed to remove it? Or
No.
do we just need to add something that this excludes the corn pellets itself?
Just to bring it up to you guys for discussion.
Okay.
That you're right, you may have a new gym added or something else that you would want to reserve the right to name. That's a very good point, but not wanting people to get the impression that we would sell the name of the Corn Palace for $50,000, because that alone has way more value for brand recognition than $50,000.
So I think if we just put some kind of a sentence in there, or Justin did, that would clarify that we could leave it in there,
Okay.
just in case.
That's great.
Spoken from a good attorney. So back in 2010, obviously, it was a road on Sixth Street and not the plaza. So does the current contract should not include the plaza? Would that be a safe?
outside of the building.
It's only inside the building, okay.
Because I think there was even some conversation that we had with Scott, whether the murals could be sponsored. And I can't remember, I think he even talked to Daktronics about it at one time, but I don't remember what the outcome of that discussion was, so I'd have to follow up on that. But I know the interior of the building has limitations.
And just because I'm fairly new, would you help me out? Do people make tree donations, and are we seeking more for the plaza?
Well, I don't see us putting in any more trees in the plaza.
That's kind of my thought. And how about benches?
Actually, we are adding more benches. We are adding 2 benches with the expansion we're doing phase 2, which is the shade structure and the stage, and there is, actually, I think there's 4 benches under this shade structure.
Okay.
So there would be maybe a potential for someone to sponsor that if they wanted. The other thing to keep in mind is Park and Rec, I know that as some deteriorate and they want to replace them, they will sometimes have someone sponsor it on replacement. But it's up to you to make a recommendation, so.
Jerry, do you hear a lot of comments about the plaza? Good, bad?
Yeah, actually, I think people like it, you know, we just want to probably use it a little more as more as we can, but yeah, there's good things about the plaza, definitely. I think people enjoy it. I know the tourists enjoy it. They're out there taking pictures, and sometimes they'll be out at the picnic tables, so.
I can tell you that the mayor was contacted by someone who is interested in a donation towards the stage, a significant share of the stage. They didn't want naming rights. They want a little bit of recognition for the reason why they're donating it, which is great. And the other thing is we've talked to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they're looking at the donation of the back part that shows the Corn Palace logo on it and stuff like that on the sign, that kind of entry piece on the east side of the facility.
Remind me again, Stephanie, where are we at in that process with letting those bids?
We just had the pre-construction or pre-bid meeting today. Bids will be let or opened next Tuesday at 1:30. So then we'll know how that comes in. The intention is to get footings and foundations poured this fall and do work over the winter. Their substantial completion date is before May 29th, or they start seeing damages daily. So,
So those donations are covered where under this?
well, I don't
proposed?
know if they would be covered under there. We may need to add a section for that. There's also been really conversation about whether the plaza should fall under the Park and Rec or under this one. In my mind, I think it falls under the Corn Palace sponsorship policy, because it's Corn Palace staff that are usually helping with those events over there more than Park and Rec will come and maintain it, but it's our staff that are having to do setup and tear down and coordination of those events at the Corn Palace. So it makes sense to me for it to be in this policy. So if you want to specifically add something to that, we certainly could.
Well, I think if the Corn Palace Plaza falls under our purview, we should have specific guidelines other than tree donations and bench donations.
And I
I
think,
guess immemorial.
yep, and that might be under what he was listed there with the existing facility naming opportunities. Maybe under the new facility naming opportunities. Of course, they're not asking to, or it could even fall under, I don't see one that really is specific for even just sponsorship of it.
Is that something Justin could
Yeah,
draft and possibly add?
yep. I might call it a features.
Something
Right?
that is a little more open-ended
Yep.
than just new facility or
Yep.
existing facility, because it really just doesn't fall into either of those categories.
Okay. Got it. Anything else that you see that you would like to have changed?
With these donations, say 10 to 15 years, is that in concrete or is that flexible?
The reason why is the city policy names that, we'll go into here on the length of terms of those. Right here. The default is 15 years in city policy. To go beyond that, I believe you require council approval if you're going to go beyond what the city policy is. Because Nate basically kind of followed his to what the city guidelines were when he adopted it, and I believe Scott said he had mirrored after that, so.
Were you asking, Ron, if it's less than 10 years?
Yeah, if there
Yeah.
was, you know,
Like 7, I got, you know,
if somebody said, I'll, give you $30,000 for 4 years or something, would you take that, or would you say, no, you
Well-
have to do?
The other thing you could do is on that same, you're under the existing facility naming opportunity, is that where you're at, Ron?
You know,
You could actually just take that 10 to 15 out, and then the board would determine the length. And you would just have to stay within what that city policy is, and then you're not naming that 10 to 15 years at all. That gives you as a board more flexibility to consider the donation that's being made.
we'll give you a lot of trees.
Maybe come and trim them too.
The benches are the spendy things, believe it or not.
I like the idea of having a little flexibility there, though.
Yeah.
It could
Okay.
even say up to 15 years or
Yep.
whatever, but
Any other recommendations?
Sam, you see us on the web?
Yeah. Billy asked me to stream it. I'm sorry, I should have told you, Sam, you didn't have to come either. That's funny.
You might have been napping. I'm not-
No other discussion on the naming sponsorship rights?
Okay. And we don't need to take action. I'll just bring that back for your next meeting with the changes that the board recommended. Okay?
So we're going to go into executive session?
Yep.
Sam, nice seeing you. Okay, do you have a second?
Go back to YouTube if you want to
All in favor,
discussion.
say aye.
I
Aye.
Motion carried.